Well, as I hope the discussion leaders have told all of you, I am home with a sick kid. My youngest daughter, Louise, is sick. She probably caught it from yours truly. So yeah, it's my penance to stay at home. No, it's good to stay at home with her. But of course, I'm missing being with all of you, and because I am excited about sharing this lecture that I prepared for you on the Suite du Merlin, I thought I would give it a shot over this video. I apologize that it's impersonal, but I thought I would give it a shot. And if you lose engagement, what happens? It should be on the wiki page, and so I guess you can go back and check it out then as well. I will also say that I'm going to be recording this in, I think, 4 short segments. And so I've asked the discussion leaders to play those in sequence. The last one will be followed by a short video, which is also available on the wiki page, from the 1981 film Excalibur. It's a scene between Merlin and Morgana, and in the case of this film, Morgana really is kind of an amalgamation of Morgan Le Fay and also Vivienne, who is the Lady of the Lake in the suite for today's reading. But before I launch into the suite, I did want to revisit, and this is what will be the subject for the first segment here. I wanted to revisit the ending of the prose Merlin. So if you would take out your texts, that would help for you to follow along. And I would just want to revisit some topics that we discussed on Monday. And one was just, of course, the character of Merlin. I emphasized quite clearly that Merlin, more than maybe any other Arthurian character, is not at all interested in love. You may wonder after reading the suite why I said that, but I'll explain. Maybe you can argue about this afterwards after I present my own perspective on this. But the kind of love that Merlin expresses in the suite is not what I would really call love. I think it's characterized more as lust, and in some ways there's kind of a moralizing punishment for him at the end. But in the prose Merlin, we don't really see much indication at all of any sort of love interest for Merlin. He's more, or at least the writers are more interested in focusing on how he manages that difficult tension between his demonic identity and also his Christian one. And so he is an antichrist in the sense that he is created by demons as an answer to Christ, because Christ, harrowed hell and let all these virtuous pagans out like Adam and Eve, and so the demons were feeling really lonely and wanted to have somebody be their representative. So they picked Merlin. Well, of course, we know that this plan was foiled. God knew it all along, and so Merlin was baptized, and he chose a more virtuous life. Or at least that's what we think he did throughout most of the prose Merlin. The suite will suggest something a little bit different, and suggest maybe he kind of converted to the dark side. Also, his use of magic we talked about last time, and the use of magic there were 2 different kinds of magic really in the Middle Ages. The way that they explained them, this kind of white magic and this black magic. The white magic was magic that was generally sanctioned by the church, which was the use of herbs for remedies. So when Merlin is described as using an herb to rub on the faces of Uther and Urfin in order to change their features, that was somewhat on the borderline of what was acceptable, although the fact that they were using it to change their shape was not acceptable. Any sort of shape-shifting was not deemed an acceptable use of magic. And of course we see this happen a few different times where there are, like when Merlin is given the baby King Arthur, we see that he's not identified as Merlin. He's identified as this older man. So let's talk about that section in the birth of Arthur. And just to lead up to that, in order to understand what happens in that section, and we talked a lot about this on Monday, Igern is very much unlike her previous representations in Wace or Lawman or Jeffrey. She is much more resistant. I mean, you can make arguments for resistance in those earlier texts too, but the writers of the Prose Merlin, or Robert de Boron, or whoever we can attribute this to, they clearly decided that Igern was going to be a resistant character, right? It makes it quite clear that when she makes love with Uther, that it is done out of love for her husband, the Duke. And so the birth of Arthur, the pregnancy that occurs, is then a problem, right? Because now she has to eventually learn that this is, Uther's child, and so Uther and Urfin are trying to figure out the best way to deal with this. And so Urfin and Merlin are discussing this, and this is on page 355. I have my book in front of me here. This is right before the section, The Birth of Arthur. And Merlin says to the king, to King Uther in private, he says, "My lord, you must take care not to let Igern know that you went to bed with her. That more than anything else will put her at your mercy, so that if you ask her about her pregnancy and who the father is, she will not be able to tell you, and she will be very embarrassed. That is how you can best help me obtain the child." Right? Because Merlin has made the deal with Uther that he will allow him to kind of fulfill his lust for Igern as long as he gives him something that he asks for in return. And so this thing that he asks for is the child itself, who is Arthur. What's Merlin's tactic for getting the child? And it's shaming this woman, which I think we should legitimately question as a kind of a strategy for getting her to give up her child, right? To actually make her embarrassed because she doesn't know who the father is. And of course, this quite appropriately mirrors Merlin's own birth, where his mother does not know who the father is. Okay, so then in the section of the birth of Arthur itself, there seems like an obsessive emphasis on, on my sniffling here, just kind of the legalistic terms of the settlement, because they have realized that they've wronged the Duke and his family, and so they're trying to figure out ways in which they can kind of pay them back for all of the harm that's been done to them, kind of